Good morning. Yeah, it's only been one Sunday in between the last time we were in this. It seems like ages ago. So I'm not sure where we're at. I think we are somewhere in 1 Kings chapter 16 and 2 Chronicles chapter 16. At least the numbers sort of kind of come together, which is helpful in my memory.
It's the bottom end that's ringing.
Probably, to begin with, we probably ought to just kind of get ourselves back to where we were, because I'm not sure where we were. So at least we'll be starting on the same page. You can see this is a little bit of a modern map, because you see Caesarea there, which wouldn't have been there, being it's named after Caesar, which means Roman government, which means New Testament times, which means this map is way more recent than the passage we're studying. However, it does have one of the places we're going to be right there. It has Samaria on the map, and we're going to need that after a while, so at least you can get your bearings based on that. So we've got the location anyway, even if not the right exact time frame. We probably ought to begin back in Judah, because it's just a good place to start, back in Jerusalem and in Judah. And that takes us to really Chronicles, because you'll remember Chronicles is pretty much follows Judah all the way, and Israel's kings are more of just a mention as in what's going on with Judah. So in 1 Kings we're going to see a lot more of Israel and what's going on with them. In Chronicles, more focused on Judah. This morning it's really great. We get to start out chapter 16 verse 1 with a correction. And I don't know if anybody else noticed it or not, but it tells us that in the 36th year of Asa's reign, Baasha, king of Israel, came up against Judah. However, if you go back to Kings, you find out that Baasha is dead by the 36th year of Asa's reign. And you go, how can that be? How can he be fighting a battle? He's been dead for a bunch of years already, according to Kings. So obviously the scholars noticed this as well. And if you would like to put a note in your Bible, if you're in the habit of making notes, you want to write in 16th there as being the more likely correct date. And they believe that a copyist error had caused that 30 to get in there. And if you go 16th, then it all fits together, and the timeline with Kings and Chronicles all falls together. But when you go with 36, you got serious problems, because people don't match. You know, wait a minute, this has got to be really wrong. So in chapter 16, 2 Chronicles, in the 16th year of Asa's reign is when Baasha, the king of Israel at that time, came down and started a campaign where he came down to Ramah. And I don't think we have Ramah on any of our maps, do we? Because it really, they're not sure exactly where it was. Part of the reason may be that they packed all the stones off and used them elsewhere. But it was on the northern border, would have been the northern edge of Judah. Whoa! It would have been somewhere along this border area that they came down, and they've made inroads down into Judah. And so they've kind of penetrated down in here. Probably was a little further south than this map showed. So they were pushing down towards Jerusalem, trying to gain some territory. And you'll remember there's this battle back and forth all the time going on. And especially during the reign of Baasha and Asa, they just were nitpicking with one another all the time. So we have this battle that goes on, and you'll remember Asa in the past has been really faithful to God, and when a major threat from Egypt, he trusted God to take care of things and had a huge victory. And last time I think we looked at this, that when this incident came around, he decided by his 16th year that he had some things under his belt, I guess. I don't know. Maybe the threat from the north was more scary than Egypt. It's hard to imagine that. But for some reason, he decided to empty his treasuries and buy some support. And so he bought off Israel's ally, is what they did. Israel had an ally, and let's see, we can pick it up briefly there in verse 2. It says, he bought out silver and gold from the treasuries of the house of the Lord and the king's house, and sent them to Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, or maybe it's Hadad. I don't know how to pronounce those things. I actually looked some of these up in one of the Bible dictionary things, and they're all over the map. So some guys say this way, some say that way, and the real Hebrews probably know it differently. Anyway, so we've got this guy, and he bought him off. And it appears that he was probably a previous ally to Israel. Judah paid him money to be an opponent. And so Israel lost its support there. And when that all went down the tubes, in verse 5, Baasha found out he's getting attacked from his former ally, is now raiding the back door, and he goes, oh my gosh, I can't let that happen, and he had to pull out from his going after Judah to protect himself on the backside. And everything stopped, and the king of Judah, Asa, rushes up there, takes all the fortifications, the stones and things they were using to build up this city of Ramah, and they pack them off to 2 other towns, Geba and Mizpah, and fortify those the other way around. Doesn't that sound like fun? I'll take your 5, I'll raise you 10, I don't know what it is, this big standoff going on. I'm going to take the stuff you brought in, I'm going to take it over here. But he bought off the guy. And you'll find that there are really interesting consequences to that. It says in verse 7 that the seer, God's prophet, comes to Asa. It says, because you have relied on the king of Syria and not relied on the Lord your God, therefore the army of the king of Syria has escaped out of your hand. Now, I don't know if you caught that or not, but it never tells us anywhere that the army of Syria was coming after him, and he bought off Syria to not come. But if Syria was an ally of Israel, it may be very much the same situation as with Egypt. If you remember when the Cushites came up and came after him, they had such a great defeat that it neutralized the whole area of Egypt, and they weren't a threat for a long time after that. It's very possible what this is saying, if you had trusted me, Syria would have come in with Israel, you would have defeated Israel, defeated Syria, and removed the problem from Judah for a long time. And you blew the opportunity. That's what it looks like. It said, you had a chance to let me use you to clean up this problem and remove the threat. He says, weren't the Ethiopians, in verse 8 there of 2 Chronicles again, weren't they an immense army with very many chariots and horsemen, yet because you relied on the Lord, he delivered them all into your hand. He did it last time. He says, the eyes of the Lord, you've seen this verse, I'm sure, before. The eyes of the Lord move to and fro throughout the earth, that he may strongly support those whose heart is completely his. And you've been foolish in this. Indeed, from now on, you will surely have wars. I mean, you're going to have battles from now on. It's never going to be peace. It's going to be something you have to deal with all the time. And just to let you get a little insight here on Asa before we leave him and go back to Israel and what's going on up there, because you kind of got to get the whole picture. It says he was angry with the seer and put him in prison. Do any of you have a different translation than prison? Mine has a side note. The house of the stocks. And you go, what, stocks and bonds? What is this? Put him in Wall Street as a penalty. Oh. That could be these days. It's actually, the Hebrew word there talks about twisting. So we're talking about a place of torture. They didn't just put him in jail. Yeah, some of them say jail. Yeah, threw him in jail. Some that he put him in chains or something, but the Hebrew word, the house of stocks, actually it's talking about twisting. We're talking about a place where he was tortured. So he was angry enough not only to incarcerate this guy, but he's tortured him for telling him what he told him. There's a price sometimes that is paid. And you go, well, so where's God in this? It wasn't his fault. And yet the man's doing what he was supposed to be doing. And you have to believe that God was there with him through this time. But it's tough sometimes to make a stand for God. We'd like to believe that it's always easy and that life will never be hard. And in this country, we've been blessed and that life hasn't been that hard to take a stand. In the past, we don't know what the future holds. But it was a difficult thing for this seer. And he continues to be angry, and I thought, this is so human. He's angry at the seer, so shoot the messenger, number one. First thing you want to do when somebody comes and tells you something you don't want to hear is write them off, right? Well, what do they know? I don't want to hear it, so it's their fault. So that was the first one. And then you would think that after he cooled down a little bit, maybe he would get over it. But scar tissue of the soul doesn't work that way. Because when someone else apparently must have come to him, it says, and Asa oppressed some of the people at this time. It appears that those people, the way the Hebrew language is there, are probably not just ordinary everyday people, but probably some in the military. There's something going on here. Some of the leadership, some of those who might have been advisors, other people of influence in the country that came to him and said, this is wrong. And he said, I don't care what you think. And he oppressed them. You don't like him being in the stocks? We'll put you there too.
The Bible has a note that says crush.
Yeah, crush them.
Crush.
Not going to have any opposition. I don't want to hear it. He absolutely put them down. So anybody that raised a hand or raised a voice and said, what are you doing to this God's man, got sent to the stocks as well. So he would have just crushed any opposition. So you shoot the messenger, oppress anybody else that even tries to get near you. And it goes to the point where he was diseased, we read in verse 12 last time. And in his 39th year, he had this disease in his feet. It became severe. And even then it says he did not seek the Lord but the physicians. And the term they're seeking is he didn't, it's not that he just went to the doctor. It's meaning he pinned all his hopes. He may have done whatever spiritual things the healers told him to do, whatever it was, that he pinned everything on these doctors. He absolutely rejected any idea that he should go to God and that it had anything to do with a message or anything from him. So he's totally shut out anyone or anything that would direct him to reconsider his actions and go back to God. Really interesting for a guy that started out so good and so tuned in to what God was saying. And yet it's very revealing about what the heart of man is like. That once we, were you like David, who when God came and said, you're the man, David, went, oh, it is me? Or are we the one that goes, I did not? I think I said the story of the little kid and the chocolate, oh, the taste and everything. Have you been in the chocolate? No. No. It was her. It's him. No, it's not me. And then to violently stick to that scar tissue does something to your brain, to your thinking, and when you get harder and harder and harder defending yourself, you won't listen to anyone to the point where you will die. It's like you've seen it before. Usually it's young people, not always, but you're driving too fast, you drive like that, you live like that. One of these days you're going to wrap around a power pole and that will be your last drive, son. Usually. Now I'm seeing young ladies go, so I might be, they're on the cell phone. You drive on that, you text and drive, you may die. Yeah, I don't have to listen to them, those little fogies, what do they know? Right up to the point where
had a cousin who married a man, and he became an Adventist minister. Later they were divorced when I talked to him several years ago.
Yeah.
He did not believe in faith.
Yeah. Yeah, you go, how could you be so, you were a minister, well, there was a king, similar position, and something goes and happens, and all of a sudden now I don't believe that anymore. Well, because if I do, it will tell me, you know, what I have to do, and I don't want to hear that. I don't want to admit that God might have anything that He's trying to say, so the best way to do it is to reject the idea that there's any God at all, and then I'm free and clear. Meanwhile, back at the ranch in Israel, while that's going on, it is really exciting times in Israel. It is a wild and woolly rodeo up there. We have had a long reign, really. Jeroboam has been king for quite a while, clear into the second year of Asa's reign. Asa became king 2 years before Jeroboam came to his end. And so here's your chart. Let's see if I can make sense of it. You can see we start out these two guys together, then we switch over to Asa here, and we don't pick up these guys till here. So we've got some overlap between this guy and this guy. Just a couple of years, but there's just a little overlap. So Asa knew Jeroboam before we have rapid fire succession right here. Well, rapid fire here, and then boy, oh boy, these, you know, it's bing, 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 bing. Between 951, notice the dates, 951, 951, 951. Does that tell you something? Got 3 names and 3 dates, and they're all the same year. Boy, that was a very good year in Israel. So, interesting times coming up here. Let's take a look at what's going on. We back up just a little bit to 1 Kings 15. I told you 16, but we're going to have to back up just a little bit to catch Nadab. Chapter 15 of 1 Kings, verse 25. Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, became king over Israel in the 2nd year of Asa, king of Judah. And he reigned over Israel a whole 2 years. Well, almost 2 years, actually, if you get to looking at the dates. Didn't work out so well. And you know, Jeroboam died thinking, yeah, my son taking over. All right, no, the seer didn't know what he was talking about. See, I told you, it's going to be okay. My son's going to reign after me. And he was a really nice guy. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord and walked the way of his father and his sin which he'd made Israel sin. And then Baasha, the son of Ahijah of the house of Issachar, conspired against him. So conspired, that word means that this one guy said, you know what, I'm sick and tired of this guy. I'm going to take him out. Now, conspire means you go to, hey, come on. We don't need to put up with this guy. We can do better. And with the next one, and the next one, and the next one. So we got a conspiracy going on, and it's bubbling through the land of Israel. And this guy is king, and he is thinking everything's fine, probably. And underneath the yes sirs and no sirs, and good to see you, Mr. President, and everything, stuff's going on. And this guy puts this conspiracy together, and they waited until they were down at Gibbethon. And I don't think any of my maps I could find have it on there. But it has to be on the borders. Philistia would have pressed up, would have been higher than here. Would have pushed up in this direction. Somewhere up in here would have been kind of the border. And this town pops up over and over as one that looks like the Philistines came in and took from them. And were holding as kind of a outpost to make inroads into Israel. And it was a constant sore spot. They were down there more than once. And we'll see it show up more than once. So they're down there and they're laying siege to it. So they put together this campaign. May have even started before Nadab became king, because there's a lot of planning to do a siege. You got to bring in all the military. You got to shut off all communication and all foodstuffs going into a city. It's a big operation. So it may have been going on a while. Nadab comes in and he's down there, and while they're down there, Baasha killed him. And in the third reading, and reigned in his place. So verse 28, he takes him, he's the conspiracy, they work out something, and they struck him down. They slit his throat. It's a military coup, if you will. And as soon as he became king, as soon as you're king, what do you got to do? Get rid of anybody with a claim to the throne. You got a clean house. And the prophet said, Jeroboam, nobody's going to be left. And here it is. Verse 29, as soon as he was king, he struck down all the household of Jeroboam. He did not leave to Jeroboam any person, any male, any breath is what the Hebrew says, alive, until he had destroyed them. It says, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke by his servant Ahijah, the Shilonite. And because of the sins of Jeroboam, which he sinned, and which he made Israel sin, because of his provocation with which he provoked the Lord, God of Israel, to anger. And the rest of the acts of Nadab, whatever few they might have been, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel, which is lost to us? We don't know what happened to that document. And there was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, all their days. So, we've got Baasha moving in, and he actually stays there 24 years. He's going to be there quite a while, and he and Asa are going to be at it for the whole time. So it looks like this guy, Baasha, was doing God's will in a way, doesn't it? Kind of looks like he came in, did what God wanted him to do, cleaned house, and he's there. Keep that in the back of your mind, because I want you to see what happens later as we move on. We're actually going to roll into chapter 16, cover a little more territory today, if I don't get too long-winded and shut us off. So you can kind of get we're speeding through years of history here, 24 years, real fast. It says, the word of the Lord came to Jehu, son of Hanani, against Baasha, saying, oh, now he gets a word. It came to Jeroboam, now it comes to him. Inasmuch as I exalted you from the dust, and made you leader over my people Israel. There's the interesting thing there. It says that from the dust, which is an interesting term. Anybody have any notes in anywhere that talks about that? Or did they just blow over the top of that one? It really appears that this guy, he was not one of the well-to-do, probably. He was probably not one in the inner circle. He was not one of the higher-ups. This is a guy who came up from nowhere. He says, I brought you out of the dust. You were just, the poor kid down the block that rose up through the military or whatever. I brought you all that way. I put you there, and I made you king. I made you a leader over my people. And in spite of that, you have walked in the way of Jeroboam and made my people of Israel sin, provoking me to anger with their sins. He said, I took you from there and put you there, and you never recognized it, and you just decided you're going to go the same way Jeroboam did, which is secure the border with a religious wall that keeps people out of Judah. Keep them away from Jerusalem. Keep them worshiping that calf. Do not let them go back to their God or Judah. That was the campaign of Jeroboam. That was his campaign. It says, behold, I will consume Baasha and his house, and I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam the son of Nebat. Anyone of Baasha who dies in the city, the dogs shall eat. And any one of his who dies in the field, the birds of the heavens will eat. Which means no one will remember you. There won't be a tomb for your family. There won't be anything. The dogs will eat them and they'll be gone. The birds, nobody will know where they died, who they were. It will be lost to us. Well, that was a huge ego thing, remember, for an Israelite to be told you will not be remembered. The rest of the acts of Baasha and what he did and his might, are they not written? Oh, see, it's written in the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel. They wrote it down. It's there, right? It's gone. It's lost. You wonder if that's why. God said to all these guys, you won't be remembered. They're all going to be lost to us. And the records of who all you were are gone too. And he slept with his father, who was buried in Tirzah. And Elah, his son, became king in his place. All right, my son took over. Just like Jeroboam. Fantastic thing. Great kid that he was. Moreover, the word of the Lord through the prophet Jehu, the son of Hanani, came up against Baasha and his household, both because of all the evil which he did in the sight of the Lord. This is weird what's in there at this place. Didn't we just hear this? And here he is repeating himself. Why is the writer repeating himself? He says both. Did you catch that? Because all the evil which he did in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger with the work of his hands, in being like the house of Jeroboam, and because he struck it. Well, wait a minute. Struck what? What's it? Well, it is the house of Jeroboam. And you're going, I don't know if you're like me, but I go, wait a minute. God says, I took you from the dust, and I made you leader of the king of Israel. And now, I am causing this judgment upon your household because, one, you didn't change your tune, which he's already told him that. You follow the same old evil stuff of Jeroboam, and because you took out Jeroboam and his family. But isn't that what God said was going to happen?
Even though it was God's curse on Jeroboam.
It was God's curse on Jeroboam, and yet, he said, you took it into your hands. Do you remember David? Remember David? Way back in ancient history, we were going through, and they had a new king in Israel, and the new king turned and went a direction away from God, and God says, I'm going to bring in a replacement. And he sent a prophet down, and they sorted through all the sons, and he picked David and said, that's the guy. And so David immediately went out and started a campaign to get rid of Saul, right? No. And in fact, the one time he came close and he cut off a little piece of his robe, and he got back home and looked at that piece of robe and went, ah! Struck by conscience, how could I do that to who? God's anointed person. And he waited and waited and waited and was pursued and hounded and dogged by this guy that God had rejected. And he refused to take matters into his own hands. This guy did. He said, I heard the prophecy. I'll just help that. I'll see that that happens. Since God's determined that they're going to all get wiped out, it must mean it's okay for me to do it.
I think he knew he was wearing the prophecy.
I'll bet he was. I'll bet that wasn't done in secret. I'm sure that if it was done in the court, there would have been other people in the court that heard the announcement. I'm sure God didn't allow, I can't imagine him telling the king, you're out of line, and all the people are out of line, and not letting that information be out so people would know this is going to cost you. So everybody had to have known about this. Could have been part of the conspiracy. Hey, even the prophets are with us. How can we go wrong? And God says, because you did it. You did it yourself. You decided you were going to be judge and jury, and you didn't let me work. I could have done this without you, and then you would have been king. And we're almost out of time, but look at this rapid fire here. It's 26th year of Asa, king of Judah. And those here 26 years we are of Asa. That's why we had the problem before with 36. Here we're in the 26th year of Asa, and we are already to Elah, the son of Baasha. And so you go, 10 years later, Baasha is not going to be doing anything. He's dead. So we caught that problem there that we were dealing with. That's why we think it's 16. Came at Tirzah, and he reigned for almost 2 years. And reads like something out of yesterday's news. And his servant Zimri, his servant, inside circle, commander of half his chariots, military. He was at Tirzah, drinking himself drunk in the house of Arzah, who was over the household at Tirzah. Who, do you think Arzah just accidentally happened to have him over for a couple of drinks? And let him drink himself stupid? I don't think so. Can you see the conspiracy? There's Zimri. Again, conspired against him. We got allies. Plot. You bring him down. He tends to like to drink too much. They've seen this happen before. They watched him grow up. He's the spoiled brat of the king who can have anything he wants, and a couple of drinks and he's gone. So we just get him started. We'll have a big party. Bring him on down here to your place. Bring him down there and we'll take care of that. And Zimri went in and struck him, who knows, stabbed him, cut his throat, whatever, while he's drunk. Put him to death. In the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, and became king in his place. King. And when it came about, just happened, when he became king, as soon as he sat on his throne, that he killed all the household of Baasha. He did not leave a single male, neither of his relatives nor his friends. Don't you wish you lived there?
There's no blood on the throne right now in north or south.
There's no what?
There's no blood at all. Anointing blood on the
Well, there is in the south.
There is in the south?
Yeah, because Asa is in the line of Judah. Yeah, Asa follows in the line, so he's still there.
All right.
So yeah, God's line is still intact in Judah. But on the north side, it's free for all. It is a real free-for-all. This is military coup. You've seen these governments where the military generals take over. The interesting part of this is it gets even better. He's taken over, cleaned house. He destroyed all the household, verse 12, Baasha, according to the word of the Lord which he spoke through Jehu the prophet. For all the sins of Baasha and the sins of Eli's son, which they sinned, in which they made Israel sin, provoking the Lord God of Israel anger with their idols. So they brought in they kept the golden calves going. And the rest of the acts, and they're written in the book of the Chronicles of the King of Israel. And then, in the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, Zimri reigned. Did you catch this? How long? It's a long time. 7 whole days. He got a whole week in Tirzah. So he did rapid fire cleaning house here. He took over, killed the guy, took control, and the conspiracy was solid, boy. They went through, cleaned out the whole house, all the friends, everybody. There was like an overnight slaughter. He's ruling for 7 days. And the people, meaning the military people, the army, if you will, were camped against, here we are again, Gibeathon. It's really convenient when most of the military is out of town. You can get away with a lot more when you don't have all the other folks out of town. And he apparently figured if he could do it when his opponents, anybody that would resist him, are out preoccupied down there, we can get established, we can be in charge, and there won't be a problem. Well, guess again. And the people who were camped in Israel heard it and said, Zimri has conspired and has also struck down the king. Therefore all Israel, meaning the rest of the military, made Omri, the commander of the army, king over Israel that day in the camp. See this thing setting up? Omri is now declared king in the camp out there where they're in the campaign. And they went up from Gibeathon, they packed up, in verse 17, and Omri and all the military said, you know what, we can deal with these guys later. And they pulled all out, and I'm sure the folks in Gibeathon went, whew, what a relief, they're all leaving. They had to be wondering what's going on out here. but they got a break, and they besieged Tirzah. They came back to their own capital, and they all moved in on the capital. Zimri's in there, verse 18, and when he saw that the city was taken, that he went into the citadel of the king's house, he went into the palace, if you will, and burned the king's house over him with fire and died. Courageous guy, huh? Went in there, set the thing on fire,
So there.
burned down the whole palace in the middle of Tirzah. That beautiful place, probably was a gorgeous palace too. Burned the thing down around himself, committed suicide, if you will, and anybody else that was in the palace that didn't get out is gone as well. Gosh, you just can't write stuff like
He
this.
didn't want happening to him what he did to the others.
He knew what happened to the others, I'm sure, yep. He knew that reckoning was coming, and it may be like some of the leaders that you've seen when things turned against them after they tortured people and everything, and they're saying, don't torture me. What are you thinking? Of course they're going to. And he didn't want anybody playing game, dragging him through the street, putting him on TV, and you know, all this sort of thing. He didn't want any of that. So he burns the place down around him. Wow. And so they take over. Okay, that's Zimri saw, let's see, he burned himself down. Verse 19, because of his sins which he sinned, doing evil in the sight of the Lord, walking in the way of Jeroboam, good old Jeroboam, in his sin which he did, making Israel sin. And the rest of the acts of Zimri, his conspiracy he carried out, they wrote it all down in the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel, and it's lost. And now, it gets better. Look at 21. The people of Israel were divided into two parts. Half the people followed Tibni, the son of Ginath, to make him king. The other half followed Omri. So they all defeated this guy. Now they're divided. They got two individual ones, and it's going to be 4 years of split rule, internal strife, and it's a total mess for 4 years before Tibni dies. And it doesn't tell us how he died. It appears he may have died in some kind of a conflict somewhere, but apparently not at the hands of Omri. And then Omri finally prevails in the whole thing. So, what a mess. And you see the whole nation just being totally in turmoil, the military's divided. Go to many parts of the world today where you've got all this internal strife. Go into Africa and a lot of those countries there. Look at the Sudan, North and South Sudan now, and the battles that are going on there. That's what you got. That's Israel. That's what worshiping the golden calves has brought them, and they have got a big mess. And it's going to get sorted out a little bit. Omri's going to be established, and we'll see things move on. And then we're going to move into some real familiar names. You probably see one right there. Look. You saw one. It was right there. There it is. This. And when you move into this more familiar story of Ahab and Jezebel and all that sort of thing as we roll ahead in these passages, this is his background. This is what he came out of. His dad is that guy right there. And you know he had to grow up in the middle of this. He's watched all these battles go on. And it'll tell you something about Ahab and what kind of a person he was as you understand more about the nation and his background. So we spent a lot of time covering a lot of territory here, kind of historical stuff, but you really got to grasp the chaos that's going on in this land of Israel. It is a royal mess. And it's going to take some real strong men.
Didn't change a whole lot either.
Hasn't changed a whole bunch anywhere, has it? Boy, people don't change. The human nature doesn't change. I hope you noticed one thing that just happened over and over and over, though. It looks like God going, you bum, you're out of here. But when he comes in there and said, here is the judgment on you and here's why. Do you recognize what that is? Some of them said, I don't want to hear it down in Judah. Asa said, I don't care to hear it. I don't want to hear what God has to say. And unfortunately, all these guys rejected it as well, except for the ones that sitting around the side went, oh, I can help with that. But it's God saying, I'm still here, I still care about this nation. And I'm going to judge people that lead them astray. I'm going to give them a chance to know I'm here. Why would you send your prophet in there knowing he's going to be rejected? Why would you send Moses to Pharaoh to say, hey, I'm still here?
He's giving him one more chance.
Yeah, one more chance. Grace. Over and over and over again. You'll see it all the way till he packs the nation off, saying, hey, I'm still here. And you look and see the prophecies, like I say, they happen, are going to happen. We are way out of time. I've got to quit, hush up, or Caleb won't have any time to teach today. And everybody's really going to pack before you. Father, we thank you for our time this morning as we kind of rolled through history and over a lot of points, trying to get ourselves kind of back in the groove of what's happening in these passages. Lord, let us not lose sight of the truth that your hand is still active within your people, even as they've rejected you over and over and over and over again, that in grace you still reached out to them. Even the nation of Israel, who has so moved away from you, completely away from the temple and from the temple worship. They've installed these golden calves, found their own way to worship in order to not have to be confronted with you or your law. And yet in grace you send prophets back and prophets back and prophets back. And even as we come into Ahab, we know that you took a tremendously active role in trying to get them to see that you were still very God, oh very God. And that you had called them, and you were still there trying to call them. Father, help us as we find ourselves led by our sin natures down the primrose path somewhere and find ourselves out of your will. That when you send the prophets to us, whether you send it through your word as we read or hear it preached from the pulpit, or perhaps on the radio or television, wherever it is that you meet us, maybe through a good friend that we at the time may not see as a friend. Help us, Father, have ears to hear your word and your voice, and be called back to the God of grace, who has provided for us a Savior, one who has paid that price for us that we need not pay it ourselves. Father, give us ears to hear and a heart to accept it, to turn back and repent and to follow you. Because we know the promise to your nation was if they would confess you, if they would confess their sin, if they would turn back to the temple, that you would once again bless them. Father, help us to see that you're still there, you're still waiting, and you provided the sacrifice that we need. We thank you for that grace in Jesus' name.